Hello, thank you for joining me today for my September reading wrap up. I have read one book that has completely reaffirmed my belief that I don't like women's fiction. I also read a book that really disappointed me, and I probably won't be continuing with this author's books going forwards. And one book which absolutely on paper should have been a 5-star read. I know many people will rate this 5 or even 6 stars, but for me, I found it the weakest of the series. So before we get into that in more detail, let's just recap my stats for the month of September. So in total, I finished 14 books last month, which came to 5,247 pages, which surprisingly was 175 pages per day. I really thought that I'd fallen behind in my reading, and yes, the 14 books fell short of my normal average, which is about 15 books per month. But some of those books that I read were slightly longer than normal, so overall it did mean my page per day count stayed above average. In terms of the subgenres I read, well, first of all, I read one non-romance book, and this was women's fiction. After that, there was 2 contemporaries, 1 dark romance, 1 dystopian, 1 historical, 4 mafia romances, 3 paranormals, and 1 small town romance as well. So this month, you can see I didn't read quite as many dark and mafia romances as I normally like to. In terms of how I read them, I actually had 6 arcs this month, so at least 5 arcs and 1 book that I got from NetGalley. Then there was 1 audiobook, 2 ebooks, 3 Kindle Unlimited books, and 1 physical book. And then in terms of the star ratings, I had 2 3-star reads this month, 1 3.5 star, 5 4 stars, 3 4.5 stars, and 3 new 5-star reads, and I can't wait to share those with you. As I've been doing for the last couple of months though, I'm going to start from my least favourite book of the month and work my way up to my favourite of the month. And that basically means I'm going to start with the book that I read, which was not a romance. So the book that I read, which is basically women's fiction, is All Fours by Miranda July. Now, as you know, this is not the sort of book that I would normally read, and like I said at the start, completely reaffirmed my belief that I really don't enjoy women's fiction at all, and romance is very much where my heart is and what I enjoy most when I'm reading a book. So why did I pick this one up then? Well, because if you were watching last month's reading wrap up, then you'll know that I am in a book club of sorts with some colleagues at work, and the concept here is that everyone picks a book, they annotate that book, and then they pass it on to the next person who reads it, annotates it, passes on to the next person. So there's always 6 books in circulation because there's 6 of us that are taking part, and I will get to read all 6 books, and eventually the book that I read, which incidentally was Still Beating by Jennifer Hartman, will eventually come back to me and completely annotated by all 5 of my colleagues, including myself. So this book here was a pick from one of my colleagues. So as I've said, we all have to annotate it. So as you can see, there's annotations, and how this is working is that each of us are picking a different colour to do the annotations. We've got a little bit of an index in the front here, and then basically as we go through the book, we can put our own annotations in. So my colleague picked blue, and then I am annotating this particular one in green. So what is this book about? So basically, this book is about a woman who is 45. She's perimenopausal, and she's treating herself to a cross-country road trip to New York, and she leaves behind a husband and a child. However, she doesn't make it very far, in fact 30 minutes from home, when she ends up pulling into a town and parking up in a hotel in this town just 30 minutes from where she lives. Yet she maintains the illusion to her husband, maintains a pretense to her friends that she is in fact going on this road trip. So she kind of makes up, when she's FaceTiming with them, she kind of makes up where she is in the country until eventually she's supposed to make her way to New York, and then she even pretends that she's having a lovely time in New York. But the whole time, like I said, she's actually in this hotel, in fact a motel in this town just 30 minutes from where she lives. Now what I will say was that this was a deeply uncomfortable reading experience. It was written in narration style, so basically it was the protagonist, the main female character in this one, who was kind of narrating her tale directly to us, and we never actually learn her name. But I found it a very psychedelic experience. It was just very awkward. I had secondhand embarrassment for this person the whole time I was reading it, and I really did feel like I was trapped inside the brain of this person, and I spent most of my time reading this just really feeling very cringy about the whole situation. So the premise sounds pretty good, right? A 45-year-old woman, perimenopausal, she leaves her family for a road trip, but ends up parked in a motel, like I've said, 30 minutes away. She's supposed to be exploring her identity, her sexuality, her autonomy. She's questioning things about her marriage and what she wants for her future. And she's really struggling with her work because she's kind of an artist. Again, we never fully find out what her job is, but it's clear that she's some form of writer, having either written some books or screenplays or scripts or something like that. What we actually get though is a woman who's estranged from her husband. She's pretending to drive while obsessively thinking about sex. This woman masturbates all of the time, but it isn't in an erotic kind of way. It's just absolutely exhausting to read. And she then falls in love with a married, much younger than man who she kind of meets in a petrol station, and then they kind of start this bizarre kind of friendship slash relationship, though they never actually end up having sex. And while she's there, because she's in this motel room for a couple of weeks, she ends up asking this man's wife to come and decorate this hotel room, and she ends up spending $20,000 decorating this hotel room while she happens to be staying in there. So this whole thing was very, very bizarre and absolutely gave me second-hand embarrassment. Now, as a perimenopausal woman myself, I'm in my late 40s, I really was hoping I'd be able to relate to this character, but I could not relate to her at all. And maybe other people feel something similar to how this person feels, but for me, like I said, her thoughts were very, very psychedelic. It felt very, very surreal. It felt like I was on drugs while I was reading this, so very, very uncomfortable read. And the other characters in this book were also extremely eccentric to the point of absurdity, and I felt like they acted in ways which nobody I know in real life acts quite like they do. It was almost like it was like part of some sort of flower power back in the 60s of how all of these hippies might have been kind of living. So by the end of this book, I was left feeling very, very frustrated. There was no real conclusion to this book. I don't think there was any kind of light bulb moments or her coming to terms with this midlife crisis that she was happening. And to be honest with you, by the time I got to the end, I couldn't decide if this was genius writing to make me feel so kind of out of sorts when I was reading it, or if it was just complete and utter chaos. Either way, I was relieved when this book ended, and I'm glad that I read it, but I definitely would not recommend it to a romance reader. But if you do like women's fiction, you are a woman in your late 40s, early 50s, then maybe this would be of interest to you. But it wasn't something that I enjoyed, like I said, so ended up giving this one 3 stars, and it was 2 on the Spice scale because there are explicit sex scenes in here, but a lot of it is all kind of in her head and things that she's obsessing over herself. So ended up 3 stars, like I said, and 2 on the Spy scale. Okay, so the next book that is also a 3-star is Konstantin by Lilian Harris. And I have to say, this is the book that I was most disappointed by this month because I had such high hopes for this one. This is book 1 in the Marinov-Bratva series. It's a Russian mafia romance, and we were following the story of Konstantin and Tess/Amelia. So Konstantin was a character that I'd been highly anticipating. He'd been teased out in several of Lilian Harris's series up to this point. He is not only the Pacan of the Russian mafia, but he also owns a sex club, and we've been there, we've frequented it, we've bumped into Konstantin on a number of occasions. And so, like I said, I was highly anticipating his romance, but I was left completely disappointed in this read. And it was mainly because Konstantin just didn't live up to expectations at all. For me, he acted completely out of character to what we already knew about him. He became insta-obsessed with our heroine, seemingly for no reason whatsoever. So here's a very, very hard man. He's determined he's never going to fall in love, has no intentions of forming a relationship with anyone, yet one glimpse of this woman in his bar and basically he becomes instantly obsessed with her and basically goes all in on this relationship. It just didn't ring true at all, and I wanted much more tension, a much more slower burn, much more mistrust between this couple until Konstantin cannot help himself but fall in love, and that's not what happened at all. And overall, I felt the plot of this story was really weak as well. So what we've got here is Tess/Amelia, we'll say, because Amelia is an FBI agent. She's undercover in Konstantin's sex club because her brother has been imprisoned for unaliving somebody, and she very much believes that he hasn't done it and that someone set him up, and she believes that Konstantin has some information that would clear the name of her brother. So like I said, she's gone undercover, posing as Tess, tries to get a job in his sex club, ends up becoming his personal assistant, and then starts to form this relationship with Konstantin. There were so many plot holes in this, so many tenuous links. In the end, Konstantin forces her into marrying him, you know, for protection. But the whole reason for doing this is, you know, it's completely on loose ground. It's a very, very flimsy rationale for why this needs to happen. And just overall, like I said, the plot just was very, very weak for me, didn't make sense. And another thing Lilian Harris is famous for is her shock value ending. She always makes some sort of crazy ending. And yes, this was another one where she did write it in a way that should have been a bit of shock value, but ultimately it was obvious from the beginning how this one was going to end. And so it just fell a little bit lackluster for me. Now, I did pick this one up as an ARC because I have been on Lilian Harris's ARC team. I have enjoyed quite a few of her other Mafia romances, although some of them have been a bit hit and miss for me. But I will be stepping back away from her ARC team. I am intrigued by some characters that she's introduced us to in this book. I'm interested in one of Konstantin's brothers, but I'm not going to be in a rush to pick those up. So I'm not saying that I'm never going to read another Lilian Harris book again. I absolutely will. But like I said, I've stepped back from her ARC team for now and won't rush to pick the next one up. So overall 3-star reads, but it was 4 on the Spy scale. Okay, so they're the 2 3-star reads that I had for the month. So now I've got 1 3.5-star read for you, and that was Deadly Decision by Shana Collins, and this is book 1 of the Savin Brothers Bratva series. So yes, this is another Mafia romance, and actually it was a Mafia romance between a Bratva hero called Dimitri and Elise, who is actually part of the Mexican cartel but based out of New York. So this one was very much enemies to lovers, forbidden romance, because obviously they're rival families and they're going to start a relationship together, and ultimately this one becomes a secret baby romance as well. Now, this one wasn't technically an ARC. This was the one that I got from NetGalley, because I've been trying to get some ARCs from NetGalley but have so far not been approved for any of them. And so this one is one that was sort of in their backlist. It was actually originally published in 2023, but they've still got it available on there for people to review until the 9th of October. And so I kind of hedged my bets on this one, picked it up, and I thought if I can do a couple like that and submit reviews and things, maybe then I'll be approved for others in the future. So like I said, in this one we're following Dimitri and Elise, and essentially Dimitri is a brigadier in the Bratva. He's had a couple of years in Russia, and now he's been called back to New York because his brother, who was the brigadier, has just been promoted to Pacan of New York, and so his brother Dimitri is now next in line to be the brigadier. So Dimitri has come back to New York for that purpose. Meanwhile, Elise is, like I said, in the cartel, but she never started out in the cartel. She's not a family member. She's not connected to the cartel. This is a person who really kind of worked hard. She was studying at university and needed a job, so she started working in one of the cartel bars. She did really well, worked her way up, and then she became a witness to a crime, and then they tested her and she decided to go all in on the cartel lifestyle. Like I said, she's worked her way up. She's a fantastic businesswoman. She's earned a lot of money for the cartel with her business know-how, and now she's technically third in line to the the cartel in New York. Of course, that doesn't go down too well in the cartel overall, particularly the guy who's in charge of this cartel and is technically her boss. His father is the one who is the head of the cartel down in Mexico, and the father is not too keen on the fact that his son has recruited a woman and that she's third in line. But like I said, she's absolutely brilliant at what she does, and she has negotiated a deal between the Russians, the Italians and the cartel to do a deal on one of the local ports, because she has figured out that they're constantly warring, right, and they're stealing each other's merchandise that comes into this port and they're fighting over territory. But she's realised that if they work together, this will be much more lucrative for everyone. So she's kind of got these 3 groups to kind of agree to a bit of a peace around these ports. They're going to divide it up equally, and obviously then they're going going to make more money overall. And Elise is really close to signing this deal, and this coincides with Dimitri coming back from Russia. And so she is a little bit suspicious as to why he's come back, and she's worried that he's going to try and stop this deal going through. And so she kind of does a bit of spying on him, and she goes to kind of his area of New York, if you like, goes into a bar, and they end up having a bit of a meet cute, end up having sex in the bar's bathroom, and then she kind of leaves and they kind of go separate ways. Now, she obviously absolutely knows who he is, but at this point in the story, he doesn't realise who she is. But they end up meeting again on a couple of occasions because obviously they operate in the same circles, and they're ultimately going to meet when they go and do this business deal, but they cannot stay away from each other. They've got a taste of each other now, they really want to be together, and they keep seeing each other. And of course, the longer this goes on, the longer they're going to see each other, the more problems this is going to cause for them. And so that's how their story goes. So I'm not going to say any more about that one. Overall, I really enjoyed the plot of this one. I really like the fact that this was a very capable and powerful heroine. She could absolutely hold her own. She wasn't a stranger to kind of like violence and needing to do things for the family and for the business. And I just really enjoyed the plot of this one. What I will say is that I don't think it was particularly well executed, but I do think that this was probably the first book that this author has written, because when I've gone back to look at her catalogue, there's only 2 books so far in this series. This was written, like I said, in 2023, and there's only 4 books that she's ever written in total that I can see on Amazon, unless she's written under a different pen name. And so I think this is probably, if it's not a debut novel, then it's a very early novel for this author. So I think this author definitely has potential. I can see how her writing could grow to make this story more powerful, but overall I still really enjoyed the read. The plot really pulled this through, and while there were some kind of gaps in the execution, like I said, I still enjoyed this one. So rated it 3.5 stars, and it was 3 on the Spy scale. And now we're on to the 4 stars, and the first 4-star is The Darkest Corner of the Heart by Lisina, Coney, and this was book 2 of the Brightest Light series. This one was a rec from the jar, but it was recommended anonymously, so if it was you, thank you so much for the recommendation. And on that topic, a quick segue, as always, if you've got any recommendations for me, please don't hesitate to let me know, either in the comments box, or there is a link to a book recommendation form in the description box down below. Let me know what you think. I particularly enjoy mafia and dark romances, but I'm open to all subgenres of romance. So if you have read a book that you've absolutely loved, you know I haven't read it but you think I'll really enjoy it, please let me know, and I'll add it to my TBR jar, which sits just here on the shelf for a chance to be pulled out when I do my TBR videos each month. Okay, so with that out of the way, what is this book about? Well, this is a contemporary romance. It's an age gap between Maddie and James. Maddie is a professional ballet dancer, and she is training really hard for an audition to a really important ballet school that she is desperate to be able to dance at. Unfortunately, as she's training so hard, she injures herself and really damages her ankle. So now she's not able to go through with the audition, and instead she's referred to a physiotherapist who is supposed to be really good and has got a really good track record, and so she's very hopeful that she'll be able to dance again. But of course she's very much struggling with the fact that she has missed her opportunity for this audition. So she starts then seeing this physiotherapist, and he is so grumpy. He's a really grumpy guy, but he's also really likable as well. And over the course of her treatment, they become very close. It's clear that there is a connection between them, and he goes out of his way to make sure that she's taken care of and that she's okay. And they start to see each other outside of the treatment room as well, not deliberately, but they end up sometimes at the same bar together and having conversations together, and he takes her home on a couple of occasions, that sort of thing. But the author does a really good job in this book of making sure that they don't cross any lines. While she's his patient, they absolutely don't do anything that there is inappropriate or that they shouldn't do. And the other big angle of this book is that James is about 10 years older than Maddie. Maddie's only 21, he's in his early 30s, and this is a really big factor for both of them. Now, for me, as a romance reader, where I read a lot of age gaps, 10 years doesn't even seem that much, but this couple were obsessed about that age gap, and it was kind of one of the big factors between them in terms of whether or not they should be together. So overall, I enjoyed this read, and I think on paper this should have been a 5-star read, because I think the author did a fantastic job. I really enjoyed the plot. These are really well developed characters. I feel like they had a great emotional connection. Both characters have been through quite a lot in their lives. They connect on an emotional level as well as a sexual level, and so I think it did a really good job. Just for me, again, I prefer a much darker story, something a little bit grittier, and while this one was emotional, it just didn't get to me quite as much as I wanted it to, and I didn't quite connect with the characters as much as I probably should have done. So for me, overall, really solid read, 4 stars, and it was 2.5 on the Spy scale. Next up, I've got a fun short monster romance called Squatch Out by Deysi O'Donnell. This is a standalone, but she'll probably write more in this series, and this is a fated mates romance between a Bigfoot, so a man who basically is also a Bigfoot, and Olivia, who is a Bigfoot hunter. So like I said, this is a fairly shortish read, just 235 pages. It was super fun. Deysi O'Donnell's got a really easy writing style, and I thoroughly had a great time while I was reading this. Essentially, like I said, Olivia is a Bigfoot hunter, an amateur one. She, you know, she's got a regular job, but when she was a child, she absolutely believes that she saw a Bigfoot, or a Sasquatch, as they call it in this book. And as a result, she's kind of become obsessed with kind of trying to get proof that they exist to reaffirm what she believes she saw. And so she's kind of part of this Bigfoot community of people that are Bigfoot hunters or have had experiences where they've seen Bigfoots. And so at the start of this book, she arranges with a couple of friends to go on a hiking weekend in the Pacific Northwest to see if they can camp out at a place where there have been Bigfoot sightings, just to see what they can discover. And of course, when they get there, she is in fact going to encounter a Bigfoot, and it's going to be our hero in this one, Sean, because although he resembles a human in everyday life, he has got the Bigfoot gene, and when he smells his fated mate, he can sense that she belongs to him. He kind of squatches out basically and becomes a Bigfoot. He charges into their camp, he picks her up, puts her over his shoulder and kind of storms off with her, and their relationship goes from there. Of course, they're going to have to try and navigate this relationship where, you know, her friends are maybe going to want to get some pictures, get some proof that he exists, and of course the local town is going to close ranks to protect the Bigfoots from the rest of the population. So like I said, a quick and easy read, and would definitely recommend. Next up, another book that was recommended, and this one was recommended by Misty Morning, so thank you so much for the recommendation. And this particular one is Paved in Blood by Sonja Gray. This one was book 1 of the Melnikov Bratva series, so another mafia romance between Roman and Emily. Now this was an absolute no-brainer for me. I really enjoyed it. I have enjoyed everything I've read by Sonja Gray so far. She does some very nice mafia romances, and I would say that while sometimes their subject matter is quite dark, the romances between the couples are always so light. These heroes fall fast and hard, and they are absolutely soft in the centre for their women. So I really enjoy them, because straight out of the gate they tend to be very insta-lovey. The characters are great, and she always does a really good kind of overarching plot, not just for the individual stories but for the series as a whole. So this one definitely sets us up for a great series, and I think there's 5 in this series so far, following all of the Melnikov brothers, and I definitely will be going on to read more of these. But this one starts, like I said, with Roman and Emily, and Roman is kind of head of his Bratva family, and what we learn is that they very much, him and his friends, grew up on the streets in Russia. They had to fight their way to their top, and they have built themselves a very powerful criminal empire. Unfortunately though, Roman's sister has gone missing, and he very much believes that she has been taken by sex traffickers, and so he and his friends are on the tail of these sex traffickers. He's going to burn the world down and overturn every stone in the pursuit of finding out who's taken his sister and getting her back. So this takes him and his friends to New York, and it's there where they think they have found out who the ringleaders are, but they need to kind of go undercover there. And this is where Roman meets Emily, because Emily is the daughter of a politician in New York. She started to suspect that her dad is up to bad things and has also started to investigate him herself. And so when she bumps into Roman at this kind of event, shall we say, they instantly form this connection. Roman realizes that she is also trying to spy on her father, and they kind of group together to try and figure out exactly what is going on. Like I said, it's very insta-lovey though. Roman falls for Emily very, very quickly, brings her under his protection, but part of this story, when they're going undercover to find out what's going on, means that they do have to visit a few strip clubs, and she has to pose as his pet in order to, you know, make sure that she can get in, and that they can kind of, you know, prove that they are genuinely bad people trying to buy women. And so this is how the story goes. So like I said, it sounds like the content is very dark, and on one level it is, but also the romance between Roman and Emily is super sweet. He is so soft in the centre for her, will do anything for her, and I absolutely love these stories. So overall, 4-star read, 3 on the Spy scale. Definitely will go on to read more in this series. Next up then we have the first of our Immortals After Dark books that I'm going to be talking about, because each month I've been reading 2 in the series, and this month I read books 15 and 16. So the first book that I rated 4 stars was Dark Sky by Kresley, and this was book 15 in the Immortals After Dark series. Of course, these are paranormal romances, and in this one we're following Thronos, who is a Reckoner, who's essentially a demon with wings, and Lanthe, who is a sorcerer. Now, the Reckoners and the sorcerer are mortal enemies, but we learn that Thronos and Lanthe met when they were children. He instantly recognised her as his fated mate, and they formed this very innocent friendship as children. However, Thronos' parents unalived Lanthe's parents, and as a result Lanthe turned her impressive powers on him, and she is the queen of persuasion, which basically means she can make anyone do anything she wants. And she made him jump out of a building, very, very tall building, plummet to his, you know, demise, and not use his wings to save him. And as a result, he has been left very, very damaged. And now in adulthood, in his immortality, he still isn't 100% perfect, and he lives with a lot of pain. So he lives with a lot of chronic pain, and so while he can fly, it causes him a lot of pain to fly. And many years have passed since this incident, and since this all happened, Thronos and Lanthe are obviously mortal enemies, and Thronos absolutely wants to seek revenge on her, and he's been trying to get to her ever since. So almost 1,000 years have passed where he's been absolutely relentless in his pursuit of her and her sister, and she's absolutely scared to death of Reckoners generally, because she's had run-ins with them on many occasions, and it's not ended well any of those times. So although they're kind of fated mates, they're mortal enemies, and at the start of this book, Thronos finally gets his chance. He is able to capture Lanthe and take her with him, and he's determined to take her back to his home, and he is going to absolutely take his revenge from her. Of course, as they start this journey, they're going to get closer together. They're going to start to see each other's side of the story. They're going to learn about things that have happened that they've not been aware of, and Thronos is going to start to question everything that he believes about himself, but also his species as well. And of course, their romance is going to go from there. So really, really enjoyed this one. 4 stars, 3 on the Spy scale. It didn't quite live up to my expectations, because this couple had been teased for quite a long time in this series, and I had high hopes that this one was going to be one of my favourites. But unfortunately, while I did really enjoy it, again, it wasn't quite as good as I was hoping it was going to be. So 4 stars. But if you want to know more detailed thoughts, more detailed analysis, and also what Amber from Amber Reads Romance thinks, because she is the one that's been doing this read along, this year-long readathon so that we can get through all of the books in the Immortals After Dark series. We're actually doing a live show tonight, so as I'm recording this, tonight is going to be the live show. So by the time this video goes up on Monday, you'll be able to watch a recording of that live show. So if you, like I say, if you want to know more detailed thoughts, and particularly what Amber wants to hear about that, check out her channel. I'll put the link in the description box down below, and you can watch a recording of the live show. Next up, I've got one that might surprise you, that this has in fact been rated by me as a 4-star read, and that is Wildcard by Elsie Silver, which is book 4 of the Rose Hill series. This is a contemporary small town romance between Bash and Gwen, and this is another age gap romance, but it's also his son's ex-girlfriend, found family, grumpy sunshine, and they end up being roommates as well. So let me tell you a bit about this book, and then I'll get back to why this is only a 4-star for me and not a 5-star, as many people I know will rate this one. Gwen is a yoga instructor, and she goes all around the world teaching, and she loves her nomadic life. She loves traveling and experiencing different countries and different cultures. And at the start of this book, she is at an airport waiting for another flight to go somewhere else. I don't even know where she's going, but she's at the airport. Now, due to bad weather, she is stuck in the airport. Some of the flights have been delayed and she can't catch a flight till the following morning. And that is where she meets the hero of this story, Bash, because he's in a similar situation. He is also stranded at this airport, and they end up sharing a table together in the restaurant, and then end up spending the night together in this airport, just talking and walking around and having a great time. And they have a real deep and meaningful connection. At the end of the night, Gwen gives Bash her phone number, and Bash attempts to make contact with her, but even though he texts her several times, she never ever comes back to him, and he's really upset about this, but kind of moves on. And several months pass, and then they get their second chance to be together, but unfortunately for both of them, it's not a second chance that lasts too long, because what we discover is that Gwen is actually been seeing Bash's son, and they end up meeting at Bash's son's birthday party. So he turns up for his son's birthday party, and he is introduced to his son's girlfriend, who happens to be Gwen. And of course, he's really unhappy about this, and has a confrontation with her and says, how come you didn't ring me back? And then they realise that actually he's taken down the number incorrectly. And she really wanted him to contact her, was disappointed when he didn't, but eventually, as the months passed, she decided to move on and ended up going out with his son. And this is completely coincidental, because what we also learn is that Bash has been very much estranged from his son. In fact, he didn't even know he existed, because he ended up getting a girl pregnant in high school. He was from the wrong side of the tracks. This girlfriend that he had was from a wealthy family, and when she discovered she was pregnant, the parents moved away and then refused to let her tell Bash that he was going to be a father. And so Bash has only recently discovered that he's got a son, and he's trying to build this relationship with his son. And so this becomes the conflict between this couple, because as soon as Gwen realises what's happened, she actually splits up with the boyfriend, and in another twist of fate ends up going to live in Rose Hill as the local yoga instructor. So now Bash and Gwen have a chance to be together, but there's two things coming between them. One, their age difference, and the other one, which is more important for Bash in particular, is the fact that she was dating his son, even though it was only for a short amount of time, because he's trying to build a relationship with his son and doesn't want anything to jeopardize that. And so he is feeling a great amount of regret, heartbreak, because he can't be with her, but also resolve around not stepping in on his son's ex-girlfriend. Now, as we've seen in the Rose Hill series, there's a group of men that come together to go bowling together. These are all single dads, and Bash is part of this group, and also Clyde is part of this group. Now, Clyde is the local crazy person. He is the one that wears the tinfoil hats. He is absolutely a conspiracy theorist and completely grumpy, but he's such a likeable character, and he happens to be one of Bash's best friends. What we learn is that Clyde is quite sick. He needs a kidney replacement, so Bash ends up offering Clyde one of his kidneys, which means that after they've both had surgery, Clyde in particular needs someone to take care of him, and Gwen is the one that steps up. She moves in with both Clyde and Bash to take care of them, particularly to take care of Clyde while he's recovering from this surgery. And of course, now Gwen and Bash are going to be in close proximity together, and this is going to make it even harder for Bash to keep his distance. So that's what it was all about. The premise sounds brilliant. I love Elsie Silver. The other books in this series have been 5-star reads for me, so why was this a 4-star read? Honestly, it was because Clyde was the absolute standout character of this book. He was brilliant. He was meddling, he was grumpy, but I had so much empathy for him. We learned so much more about Clyde, his past, how much he cared about the house where he lived, how much he cared about his wife who sadly passed away about 40 years before. And as Gwen kind of nurses him back to health, we just absolutely fall in love with Clyde, at least I did. And therefore for me, as Clyde was a standout, the romance between Bash and Gwen actually took a bit of a back seat for me personally. Don't get me wrong, they've got lots of page time, but I just didn't connect with them as much as I had with other couples. And like I said, Clyde just stole the show. So as I was rating this as a romance, yes, I absolutely loved it. Of course I'm going to recommend it, but for me it was the weakest one in the series, and I ended up therefore deciding to give this one 4 stars. Okay, so we've got 3 4.5-star reads, and the first one is Sweet Ruin by Kresley Cole. So this is book 16 in the Immortals After Dark series, another paranormal romance between Joe and Rune. This was a brilliant installment from a plot perspective. We find out so much more about what is going on and what Nyx is up to in particular, but I also love the relationship between Joe and Rune as well, because we learn that Rune is actually one of the Moria. This group of Moria are the Doombringers. They are the people that are responsible, allegedly anyway, for the accession. And so they're the bad guys. And Rune is a member of the Moria, and he's known as the Archer because his weapon is a bow and arrow, and he is the greatest archer that ever there was. The thing is, he's also a demon, dark fae, which means that his blood and his bodily fluids are completely poisonous to the touch. And so he's also extremely feared. Jo, on the other hand, is a brilliant character, and she is the missing piece of the puzzle that we have around a character that we've previously met, Thaddeus. He's the young man that we met a couple of books back, and he never knew that he was an immortal. He never knew that he was part of the law. He didn't even know the law existed, but we know that he is an immortal being. He's definitely some sort of hybrid, but up till this book, we didn't exactly know what Thaddeus was, but we knew he was extremely powerful, and Nyx in particular has taken him under his wing. And of course, he was also very good friends with Lothar as well. Well, Jo is actually Thaddeus's sister. She knows exactly who Thaddeus is. She knows exactly what kind of law creature he is. And what we learn is that they come from a very special planet, and Jo saved Thaddeus's life. And when they finally kind of landed on Earth, Jo was unfortunately unalived. She was transformed then into her true nature, which, as we find out in this book, is part phantom, part vampire, which makes her extremely powerful. And Thaddeus is of this same lineage. And so Jo, after having been unalived, ensures that Thaddeus is taken care of. He's actually adopted by a human couple and has a very good life up until the point later when he figures out he is part of the law. And so Jo and Rune are a very unlikely match, but they come together in this book because Rune has been sent by the Moria. The head of the Moria is this guy called Orion, and he's been sent by Orion to unalive Nyx, because Nyx is meddling in the accession, and he's like, we need to take her out, go and unalive Nyx. And so Rune has got Nyx in his crosshairs, as it were. He's gonna, use his bow and arrow to unalive her. Jo sees this is going to happen because she's got her eye on Thaddeus, and it happens to be at the point in time when Nyx and Thaddeus are walking together in New Orleans, and so Jo prevents Rune from unaliving Nyx because she's assumed that his target is her brother and she wants to protect her brother. And of course, this misunderstanding between them leads to them having to work together, because now they very much both believe Nyx is the baddie, because Jo thinks that Nyx has influenced Thaddeus somehow, that she's keeping him captive, and very much believes that Nyx is the baddie, and therefore her and Rune are going to work together to try and get Thaddeus to to safety, and their romance goes from there. I really, really loved it. There's so much more to this book that I haven't even touched upon, but overall rated this 4.5 stars, like I said, and it was 3 on the Spy scale. Once again, if you want to know the full thoughts, want some more spoilery context, want to know what Amber thinks about that, go and check out the recorded live show that we did on Saturday night and you'll get all of the details. Next up then, I've got Tower by Claire Kent, and this book just came in the post this week. I absolutely had to have this one. So this is a post-apocalyptic fairy tale retelling. From the name, from the suggestion of the name, you can probably guess that this is a very loose Rapunzel retelling, and Claire Kent is known for her post-apocalyptic series, the Kindle series, which follows humanity after the Earth has all but been destroyed by an asteroid. And she's decided to do this little series of shorts set in the same universe but set around fairy tales as well. When I saw the front cover of this book and just saw how cute this book was, I absolutely had to have it, so I ordered it from her shop, and you can see there's some nice artwork in there and it's signed in there as well. Claire was so kind. As I'm based in the UK, I did email her in advance and asked her if she shipped internationally. She said that she did, and as I was spending quite a bit of money on the postage, I put into my shopping basket another book of hers as well, and I actually picked like a dented copy, as it were. But Claire then said, I'll make sure, some of them, some of the books aren't that damaged, so I'll make sure that I send you a really good one. And not only that, but then she sent me another book as well on top of that, free, to say thank you for ordering directly from her shop. So Claire was so kind to me, and I'm super delighted to have received this book. So what's this one about? Well, it's obviously a very short read, so super easy to read, but Claire Kent does such a great job of bringing all of the emotion and all of the feels and getting you to really fall in love with these characters, even in a short amount of time. And in this particular one, we're following Levi and Hayley. So Hayley's obviously are going to be our Rapunzel character. After Impact, her father has kept her secure in their house because she is a young woman. She's in her 20s, but very, very beautiful. And bad things have been happening to good people since the asteroid is hit, and her father's just been really trying to keep his daughter safe. Now, he's not cruel, he's not like keeping her captive. She could leave if she wanted to, but she knows absolutely the safest place for her is to remain kind of closeted away, if you like, so the bad people can't get to her. And her father knows a lot of people in the community. They kind of live on the outskirts of this town where several gangs have kind of set up, and they're kind of, able to trade with each other and kind of loosely protect each other as well. So Hayley is aware of, the players in town, as it were, and her father's even talked to her about potentially getting married, and talk to her about some men in town that might make really good partners for her. Then of course the day comes when her father actually passes away, and Hayley has to make quite a difficult decision because she knows now her father is gone, the only person that's really protecting her is gone, and as a young beautiful woman with a lot of resources actually in the house where she is, she knows she's probably not going to last too long before some bad people come to get her. And so she decides that she's going to make a deal with Levi, who is the boss and leader of a local motorbike gang, and she approaches him one day and explains the situation to him. She is very, very open and honest and says, hey, I know I'm now in a very vulnerable position. I need someone to look after me and protect me. I think you are the man for the job, and if you'll agree to protect me, keep me safe, then you can have all the resources available that are what we've got left, and also I will be your woman. So this is a very transactional relationship. She is prepared to give him sex in return for protection, and Levi's a little bit hesitant at first. He doesn't want to take advantage of her, but he also recognises that he's probably her safest option, and so they fall into this relationship together where he takes her back to where his gang hangs out, proclaims that she's his woman, and does indeed set about protecting her. And I absolutely love this one. I love how their relationship develops. I think Claire Kent, again, does such a brilliant job of making two people who aren't in love but really respect each other start to get to know each other and really learn to love each other, and I just absolutely adored it. 4.5 stars and 3 on the Spice scale. Next up then, I read an arc of Beautiful Torment by A. Zavarelli, and this is book 1 in her new series Empire of Kings. But it definitely spins off from some of the other series she's done because it connects to the IVI Secret Society, and also this one is a mafia romance, specifically Cosa Nostra as well. The couple in this one is Angelo and Abella, and I was very intrigued by this couple because they were kind of introduced in Kingdom Fall, which was a mafia romance I read last year and was absolutely fantastic. It's one of my favourites even to this day. And so when I actually had the chance to meet A. Zavarelli at the Rare 25 in London earlier this year, I asked her and said, are you going to be writing a book about Angelo and Abella? Because I have heard about them in Kingdom Fall. They really intrigued me, would love for them to get a book. And she said, actually, I'm writing it right now. And so I was super excited to hear that this one was coming out. And like I said, I was able to pick up an arc, which I was really happy about as well. The premise of this one is that Angelo is kind of head of a mafia family, or he's about to be the head of a mafia family. But what we learn is that he's kind of been set up and he's been put into the Secret Society prison, where he remains a prisoner for about 5 years. Meanwhile, Abella is actually arranged in marriage to him. So there were childhood sweethearts growing up, and as they were getting older, they were kind of arranged in marriage. So she was always destined to be his, and she did absolutely love him and want to marry him. Now, when everything goes down and he is put in prison, she actually breaks off the engagement and ends up becoming engaged to his brother instead. And Angelo absolutely believes that both Abella and his brother have betrayed him. And when he finally gets out of prison, he's going to come for his revenge, not only for his brother, but for her as well. And so this is their story of how they're going to learn to trust each other again, and whether or not he is right to be vengeful against both of them. I don't want to say too much more than that because I think it will spoil it. And yes, I know I normally give quite a lot of details about books, probably way more than I actually should. But for this one, I feel like I can't say too much more, otherwise it does spoil some of the plot line of this one. But needless to say, Angelo and Abella did live up to expectations. I really enjoyed this read. It was great to read Anais Zavarelli again because I haven't read too many of hers, but the ones I have read I've absolutely enjoyed. So determined really to read more of her backlist as well. But this one also introduces us to quite a few other characters that I'm very intrigued about, and hopefully she'll continue with this series and we'll get their stories as well. So like I said, overall 4.5 stars and 4 on the Spice scale for this one. Okay, just 3 books to go, and now I'm going to talk about the 3 5-star reads that I had this month, and I'm going to talk about them in order. So yes, they're all 5-star reads, but there is one that stood out amongst the others. So in order of least favourite 5-star to favourite 5-star of the month, we'll start with The Devil and the Deep Blue Sea by Elizabeth O'Rourke, which was book 2 in the Grumpy Devils series. Now again, if you've been watching my channel for a while, then you'll know that book 1 in the Grumpy Devils series was also a favourite when I read it. That was a 5-star read, absolutely loved that one. And again, I don't read a lot of Elizabeth O'Rourke books. I don't read a lot of contemporaries generally, or at least I try to read more darker mafia romances, but everything I've read from this author so far I've absolutely loved. I just love her writing style. It's so easy to read. I absolutely love the tension between the couples, the slow burn. Generally her books are fairly low spice, or at least it's very late in the book. But so much connection with the characters, and I was completely invested in this couple throughout, but thoroughly enjoyed the reading experience. I did actually listen to this one as an audiobook, and maybe that helped as well because it was narrated brilliantly by Lee Samuels and Samantha Brentmore. So a fantastic audiobook experience. And this one was a romance between Drew and Josh. Now Drew is a famous sort of pop star. She's like a Taylor Swift sort of equivalent. She has definitely struggling with her manager, who is obviously trying to mold her into a particular image, and she's lost all sense of herself. You know, she goes from interviews to concerts to the recording studio, and she's really lost all sense of who she is, completely driven by kind of the machine that works around her, you know, the PR, her manager and everything else. And she really is desperate to go back to her roots of writing her own songs and singing what is really means something to her, but she is stuck in this vicious cycle, and with contracts and everything else, she is very much struggling to break away from that. And not only that, we learn that she is very much suffering from anxiety. She can become very, very dizzy and collapse on stage, and this means everyone believes very much that she is an addict and also drinking too much alcohol. So at a recent concert, she has fallen off the stage. Again, the press is all a flood of news of her having drank too much, being drunk on stage, and she is supposedly sent off to a rehab clinic. Instead, where she's actually going is on holiday to Hawaii, because she has an ex-boyfriend who also happens to be in the music industry, and he's asked for a second chance, and his family are having a family holiday in Hawaii, and he said, come as my +1, because actually his parents don't know that they've split up. And so she agrees to go. She needs some time away, she needs a bit of a break. She thinks Hawaii sounds pretty good, and she is prepared to give this guy a second chance. So off she goes to Hawaii. However, the boyfriend, or the ex-boyfriend, never actually turns up in Hawaii, because he is stranded in the Far East. I don't know if he's in like Thailand or somewhere, but he's been caught for drugs in his suitcase and is currently having a bit of a stay in prison. And so he never quite makes it to Hawaii at the start of this holiday. Instead though, his brother Josh is there. Now, she's always had a bit of a difficult relationship with Josh, because they've never really got on, and she overheard him saying some pretty hurtful things about her, and so she really doesn't like him, doesn't want to spend any time with him. But of course they're going to be in close proximity while they're on this holiday in Hawaii, and as they get to know each other, he realizes that she isn't like the spoiled pop princess that he thought she was, and she starts to realize that there's more to Josh than meets the eye, and they are going to get very, very close. Josh is going to do some very swoon-worthy things for her. He's also very protective of her, and when his brother finally does turn up, they are in such sharp contrast with each other. The difference between them is night and day, and you are absolutely rooting for this couple to be together and for her to just bin off the ex-boyfriend and Josh's brother, because he is a complete and utter a-hole. But Josh is absolutely where it's all at, and we, like I said, I personally were rooting for this couple and really, really wanted them to get their HEA. It was such a brilliant slow burn, like I said, and just everything that happens. There's some really humorous parts, there's some really deeply emotional parts, and also the relationship she starts to have with the rest of the family as well. It's also brilliant, so would highly recommend. The next one is Bitter Burn by Sierra Simone, which is a really recent release. I also had the pleasure of having this one as an ARC, and it's book 3 in the Lioness trilogy. This is very much a dark romance. You could say it's a dark erotic romance, and it's also a polyamorous relationship. It's an MMF relationship between Mark, Tristan and Isolde. Now, there's not a lot I can say about this particular book, because it is part 3 and the final part of a trilogy, and we've been following these characters for quite some time. But what I can tell you is a bit of the story overall. So we have Mark, who is older than both Tristan and Isolde. He's not really old though, he's sort of mid-30s, but he used to be a CIA agent, and he's a very dark, very mysterious character. He's left the CIA, but we know that he owns a sex club and he deals in information. So the members are very, you know, wealthy, very powerful people, and he hoards secrets over them so that they will do him favors, and he basically then pulls a lot of sway amongst this community. He's also a dominant, and he absolutely adores to have a submissive, and he's a very kind of sexual character as well. Sierra Simone does a fantastic job of building Mark up as a very kind of dark, mysterious, dangerous, brooding kind of hero. He also comes across as quite selfish, very manipulative, and he's clearly got a plan. The issue is we just don't know what that plan is, and Mark is always 3, 4, 5, 10 steps ahead of everybody else. At the start of this story, he has a bodyguard called Tristan, who is much younger than him. He was in the armed forces, he's recently kind of come out of the armed forces, and now he's Mark's bodyguard, and they start a relationship. So one of the books very much features Mark and Tristan starting this relationship, but it's very much a dom-sub sort of relationship, and Tristan is kind of very much trained by Mark to be the perfect submissive for him. Meanwhile, Isolde is also a young woman, and what we learn is that Mark is arranged in marriage to her, and it's kind of a political politically aligned arranged marriage because Mark wants something from her father, who happens to be this very powerful banker, and also Isolde also has links to the Catholic Church as well, because her uncle is very senior in the Catholic Church in Vatican City. And so Mark and Isolde are actually arranged in marriage, but when they first get arranged in marriage, Isolde is only about 18, I think, and so Mark says that he's obviously not going to marry her until she's finished university and she's in her early 20s. And as part of this story, Mark sends Tristan, his bodyguard, to go and collect Isolde and bring her back in time for the wedding. And of course then Tristan and Isolde also have a chance then to form a relationship. So you can see that there's going to be very much not only a love triangle, they all end up loving each other, but it is sort of a bit of a love triangle at first, because Isolde and Mark have a relationship that is separate to the relationship that she has with Tristan, and equally Mark and Tristan also have their own relationship, but they have one together as well. So it's very interesting how this works and how Sierra Simone has written it. I didn't know that this was going to be a trilogy. When I read books 1 and 2, I thought 2 was the end, and when I got to the end of book 2 I was absolutely devastated because it ends on such a big cliffhanger, and Sierra Simone even puts, "I know, I'm sorry," because then it's revealed obviously there's going to be a part 3 to this story, and this part absolutely lived up to all expectations. We get Mark's POV for the first time. We finally get to figure out what he's been scheming for all of this time, and this group of people, this threesome, if you like, finally find a way that they can be together. It's very dark, it's very twisty, the plot is so clever, but ultimately it's the character development and the relationships between these 3 characters that is absolutely stand out. So I would highly recommend this trilogy. It's not an easy read at all. It's quite difficult to read and challenging in parts, but it was also so compelling that I absolutely had to watch until the end. Okay, finally here we are. My favourite read of the month was Eyes of Silver, Eyes of Gold by Ellen O'Connell. This one was an historical romance, and it's actually a cowboy romance set in Colorado in 1885. I actually picked this up because it was part of a prompt card that was to pick a cowboy romance, but it was also high on my priority list, and I deliberately picked this one because Jen from the Book Refuge constantly talks about this one when she's talking about her favourite historical romances, and I had it on my list for a while and I really wanted to prioritise it. So when I pulled out the prompt card cowboy romance, I thought it was finally the perfect opportunity to give this one a try, and I'm so glad that I did. From the very first page I was so invested in the story. I couldn't put the book down. I absolutely had to see how this one would play out and how this couple would be able to get their HEA. Some of the characters in this book were absolutely despicable. I absolutely hated them, and I was absolutely rooting for this couple to pull through because, like I said, this is set in Colorado in 1885, and we were following Anne and Cord. And Cord is of mixed heritage. He's half Cheyenne and half white, and of course in those days in America, therefore Cord was not necessarily treated well by the people in town. And so what we have is Cord, who is actually a fantastic man. We come to learn the truth about him and how amazing his character is. And he has got a family, but his history is very much that he's got some half brothers and sisters. They are quite a well-known, well-respected family in town, but his father ended up falling in love with a Cheyenne woman and ended up having Cord and also another child as well, Cord's sister. And of course, Cord was then very much the odd one out in town. At school, he was bullied and picked on, and as he grew older, people feared him. They thought he was violent, they thought he was dangerous, and so over time Cord is very much stuck to himself, and he lives a very peaceful life on his own ranch, and he's also a bit of a horse whisperer because he trains horses. And so this is kind of Cord's life. Meanwhile, we have Anne, and Anne is aging, shall we say. She's not old, but she's in her late 20s and she still isn't married, and her father is absolutely obnoxious. He's a horrible man, and he wants to marry her off because she is a complete embarrassment to him, and he's like, you need to get married. And so he tries to set her up in an arranged marriage with a much older man in town. He's absolutely disgusting and does not want to marry him, and she refuses. But her father, being the horrible person he is, locks her in a room, refuses to feed her until eventually she is forced to escape. When she escapes to Cord's farm, and she ends up kind of taking refuge in his barn. And the following morning he finds her in the barn, and he's going to bring her to his house to make sure she's okay and send her on her way. This coincides though with the men in town coming to find her, and of course they're going to find her with Cord, and they're going to make some assumptions about that and decide that they're going to punish this couple. And the punishment is that they're going to force this couple to get married immediately, and then they're going to beat Cord to death, and they're going to leave them both there and ride off into the sunset. Job done. Unfortunately for this group of people though, Cord is not dead, and Anne is able to drag him into the house, and by absolutely a miracle, Cord survives this horrendous beating. And now Anne and Cord find themselves in a situation where they're in fact married, and she is able to nurse him back to health, and Anne has no intentions of going back to town and living with her father, and so they kind of start this life together. Of course, when her father figures out that Cord isn't dead, he's going to be furious, and he's going to be plotting and scheming to do everything he can to get his daughter away from Cord. And it's just, like I said, I was so invested with this couple. This was an absolute page turner in the sense that I really wanted to find out how this couple were going to be together. I was so invested in them and had so much hatred for the other people in this town, and all of the things they were plotting and scheming to do, and just the way they thought about Cord and how they treated him was absolutely disgusting. But what shone through for me in this was Anne's resolve, her determination, her tenaciousness, how she saw Cord for who he really was, and how slowly but surely they ended up falling in love with each other and creating this absolutely amazing relationship together. So there were some amazing parts in this. I can't possibly talk about them all, but I'm sure I'll talk about this book again in the future and bring up other parts. But I just think it was brilliantly done, and like I said, I couldn't look away. And such a powerful story that absolutely deserves to be in my top spot for the month of September. Okay, there we are. I'm pretty sure this video will be over an hour in length, so I do apologise for that. If you've made it to the end, I want to say thank you so much for sticking with me. I really do appreciate each and every one of you who takes the time to watch a video, stay to the end, like and comment on a video. I cannot thank you enough for your support and continuing to watch my videos. It means so much to me. So as always, if you did make it this far and you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. Remember to subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content from me, and all that's left for me to do then is thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye. So Gwen is a yoga instructor. So Gwen is a yoga instructor. Now, like I said, this is post-apocalypse. Okay, so here we are. My favourite read of the month was Eyes of Silver, Eyes of Gold. Oh, I didn't even write down who it's by. Who is it by?